By the time Drew Barrymore was 9 years old, her childhood had already slipped away. She had been earning money since she was an infant, yet none of it was protected or saved for her future. The world around her treated her less like a child and more like a product. She was taken to adult clubs, exposed to substances, and surrounded by people who saw her value only in what she could provide on screen. In photos and interviews she appeared cheerful, but behind the smile she was learning how to survive in an environment that offered fame without safety. The damage had already begun long before she was old enough to understand it. Drew was born on February 22, 1975, in Los Angeles, into the famous Barrymore family, a name that carried both prestige and dysfunction. Her father, John Drew Barrymore, came from the legendary acting dynasty, but was already spiraling into addiction and violent behavior. Her mother, Jade Barrymore, dreamed of stardom that never came, and she clung tightly to the Barrymore name as a way to keep herself afloat. Money was scarce, and Jade believed the only way forward was to push Drew into acting as early as possible. At just 11 days old, Drew was placed on a television set, surrounded by bright lights, rushing adults, and no real protection. By the time Drew was 1, her parents had separated after her father's drinking became abusive. He soon faded out of her life entirely. Jade was left as a single mother, but her priorities leaned more toward chasing attention and status than creating a stable home. Drew was raised on sets, in dressing rooms, and at parties meant for adults. As a toddler, she sat quietly in nightclubs filled with smoke, alcohol, and conversations far beyond her comprehension. There were no strong child labor laws to intervene, and no one stepped in to question whether this was safe. By age 2, Drew was already working regularly, filming commercials and small roles. The money supported her mother's lifestyle, not Drew's well-being. She went to auditions alone or with temporary caretakers, learning independence before she ever learned security. Her loneliness shaped how she saw the world. She understood early that she could not rely on adults to protect her, so she learned to rely on herself. At 3, she landed noticeable television roles, despite not being able to read scripts. She memorized lines by watching others, repeating sounds without understanding meaning. On set, she was encouraged to smoke cigarettes to stay calm and appear older. These adult coping mechanisms were normalized for her before she could grasp their consequences. Acting became less about play and more about survival, about keeping her mother satisfied and maintaining her place in the industry. As her career grew, so did the emotional confusion. She appeared in films with disturbing themes and spent long hours listening to adults discuss fear, drugs, and sex openly around her. No one shielded her from these conversations. She absorbed everything, unable to separate acting from reality. School offered no refuge. Fame made her an outsider, and bullying led to fights and eventual expulsion. Instead of support, she was pushed harder toward acting, reinforcing the idea that her worth came only from performance. By 7, Drew had earned significant money, yet she had no control over it. Her earnings vanished through mismanagement and indulgence. She learned early that Hollywood could be dangerous, especially for unprotected girls. That lesson deepened when she auditioned for it after countless callbacks. The role made her a global star, but the schedule was brutal. Long workdays left her exhausted and overwhelmed, yet she kept going because that was what was expected. The success of E.T. brought fame, merchandise, and massive profits, but Drew saw little benefit. One of the few things she treasured, a custom puppet gifted to her, was secretly sold by her mother. That loss hurt deeply, symbolizing how even her most personal joys could be taken from her. As her salary increased, so did the pressure. She was expected to stay adorable and perfect, while her real needs went unmet. By 9, Drew was filming physically demanding and dangerous roles. On one set, she suffered burns and was treated casually, without concern for long-term impact. Around this time, adults introduced her to substances, suggesting they would help her relax. Alcohol followed soon after. At a party, she drank until she blacked out. She was still a child, yet no real help came. Her struggles were hidden behind a carefully maintained image. As she entered her teens, addiction took hold quickly. Drinking, drugs, and chaos became routine. She was hospitalized, sent to rehab, and labeled unreliable by the same industry that had once profited from her. By 14, she legally emancipated herself, choosing independence over a home that had never felt safe. It was a brave decision, but one shaped by deep wounds. Her teenage years were marked by relapse, risky roles, and emotional exhaustion. She attempted suicide, survived, and continued working through the pain. Hollywood both exploited her vulnerability and punished her for it. Major studios turned away, forcing her into smaller projects. Still, she kept going, fighting for roles and slowly rebuilding trust. In her 20s, something began to change. She took creative control, producing films that reflected vulnerability and humor. Success returned, not just financially but emotionally. She built flower films, insisted on creative integrity, and proved herself as a leader. She supported unconventional projects, protected other voices, and learned to trust her instincts. As she matured, Drew shifted her focus again. She directed, produced, and took on roles that demanded honesty rather than polish. Some projects failed commercially, but they earned respect. She no longer measured success only in numbers. She measured it in truth. Her personal life remained complicated. Marriages came and went, each shaped by her longing for stability. Motherhood changed her profoundly. She became determined to give her children the childhood she never had. She spoke openly about mental health, addiction, and parenting struggles, refusing to hide behind perfection. In her 40s and 50s, Drew embraced transparency. She used her platform to advocate for mental health, sobriety, and creative fairness. Her talk show became a space for real conversations, rather than surface-level entertainment. She supported recovery programs, mentored young actors, and donated millions to help others escape the cycles she once endured. By 50, Drew Barrymore was no longer defined by her troubled childhood or her early fame. She was defined by resilience. She had fallen publicly, risen slowly, and built a life rooted in compassion rather than chaos. Her story became less about surviving Hollywood and more about transforming pain into purpose. She was no longer the child who had been used by the system. She was the woman who rewrote the ending.